All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 125. This week, it was supposed to be Studio 666, the Foo Fighters horror movie, um, but it's not. Holidays and stuff, and we got busy, so we weren't able to get it done this week. So it's just me. So Studio 666 should be next week. But in the meantime, I watched Blair Witch from 2016, the remake slash sequel to the first one. Um, I don't even think you can call it a remake. I think it's just a straight up like sequel to the first movie. Um, and it ignores Book of Shadows completely. We haven't watched Book of Shadows on here yet. I'd like to one day because it has a really good ending. I kind of like it. It's a weird, quirky little movie. I know a lot of people shit on it, but I think it's fine. Um, and this movie, I'm kind of on the fence about. Um, Not really. I said that, and then I was like, I'm gonna give it a 5. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's very good either. Um, I think a lot of this movie suffers from being in 2016, and so it's having to use like flashier stuff to scare you. Like there's so many fake out jump scares, and like when we get into it, like night one, uh, it's just these super loud noises that aren't scary. Like in the first movie, they like had speakers and stuff like outside where they would be playing these noises to scare the actors and stuff, and it just nothing in this movie is anywhere near as scary or creepy as the first movie when they're in the tent and they hear like the kids laughing or whatever outside. Nothing in this movie is as scary as that. Um, Yeah, and they did a lot. Yeah, you see too much. It's scarier not knowing what's out there, and this movie kind of throws that out and is like, no, we want to show you more. And yeah, it's just not. It's just not as scary. Also, watching it, it's pretty obvious that like the last, the whole thing about the first one is they didn't have a script. They were just kind of going, making stuff up as they went. And this one was very scripted. And that's good and bad because there's points in the first Blair Witch where I feel like they really could have used a script because people they're just trying to think of something to say. Um, but at the same time, it was just unnatural some of the stuff that was happening. Um, so yeah, I did say this second time I watched this movie, I liked it better this time than I did the first time. I did like a Blair Witch marathon where I watched the first one, Book of Shadows, and then this one back to back. It was around the time the Blair Witch game came out. If anyone played that, if you haven't, or if you have, you could go watch me play the entire game on the gaming channel. Link in the description. But anyway, I liked it better this time, but it's still not like it's not something I'll watch again for a very long time. Um, but yeah, I'll give it a 5. Like I said, it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's not very good, in my opinion. So, um, but anyway, hey, spoiler warning for Blair Witch, 2016. If you've never seen it, I'm gonna ruin everything about it, so you've been warned. Um, the whole thing with this movie, so the movie starts off with like a girl running away from something behind her, and she's trying to get, and she's in like the house. It looks like the house from Blair Witch that the movie ends in, and as she like locks herself in the door, it pauses, and you hear someone go, "Did you see it?" It's okay. I missed it the first time too. And it rewinds it, and we see that there's like a mirror, and you see the woman who's running, I guess, in the mirror. And it zooms out, and we see that it's two people watching the footage. That it apparently was uploaded to YouTube. It was found, and the one dude, James, he's the main character of the movie. I would say maybe some would argue that it's like, I think her name's like Lily or something, is the girl who's filming, who's making the documentary in this movie. But James says that that looks like Heather, my sister, who went missing. So this dude in the movie, his older sister, was the girl in the first movie who went missing, and he has always sort of believed that she still could be out there. And then he sees this video that it looks like her in this mirror, and so he's convinced that she somehow is still alive out there, and she's in the Black Hills Forest still. Um, the weird thing is that unless they try to say like the Blair Witch is like manipulating things to happen over and over again, later on, spoiler, when the lady who's filming the documentary is running away and she's in the house, it's literally the beginning of the movie. Like, it's the same thing. You see the reflection of Heather, everything's shot the same way. So it was like, I mean, it was spot for spot the same thing we saw in the beginning. And I was like, is this just like somehow it's manipulated so these events keep occurring to different people, or what? I don't know. I didn't like that it was like um that it was the same thing we had seen already, because that was another person's camera that they supposedly found, um but anyway, so the dude decides he's gonna go to the Black Hills Forest and he's gonna try to look for his sister. The lady is filming this documentary for her like school exam or some project or whatever. So she decides to film it on him because he's going and looking for his sister. And so we get like some background where like he was 4 years old when his sister went missing, and in this thing, the Blair Witch movie we saw was like the footage that they found in this timeline that people saw about this lady, who went missing. So they've seen the first Blair Witch, but it was more of like a real found footage, not a movie. Um, yeah. Uh, I think a lot of this movie too suffers from, especially when it came out, is like the whole thing with the first Blair Witch is people were like, oh man, this is like real, like it was a whole thing. And nowadays, like, it's clearly like, all right, this movie is, fake. Uh, and so you can't really get that same feeling that you get from the other one that you get from this one. Um, but so they're gonna go to the forest to look for his sister. They pick up this dude Peter and his girlfriend Ashley, I think is her name, and they're like friends or whatever. And they pick them up and they're gonna come along. And as they go out to like a club that night, and Peter is like harassing the girl who's like filming the documentary, and he's like, why can't you just be a good friend and come out here with us instead of having to like have a motive for it, and you're filming all this stuff. And she like is like, well, it's just a project and stuff, and he's like, yeah, well, whatever. um yeah, but it doesn't it's also like he doesn't believe in any of this Blair Witch stuff. And there's a scene where she asks them both, because they're in a hotel, she's like, so do you guys believe in the Blair Witch? And they both just kind of look at each other like, and no one answers. But Peter, his whole thing is he doesn't believe in any of this stuff that anyone's talking about. So they go to meet up with the guy who found the footage that was uploaded to YouTube, and he's living in like this rundown house, with like, there's a Confederate flag hanging up in the living room, and they kind of just look like, not to be racist or anything, but white trash. And yeah, and so obviously Peter and Ashley are uncomfortable because they're two black people, and there's a Confederate flag, and so they're kind of like looking at it like, ugh. And Peter and his girlfriend Talia or something. It's like Talia or whatever. They're super into the Blair Witch, and they've lived here all their life, so they know all the stories and stuff. Um, and so they say, they're the ones who found the camera, and they want to know where they found the camera because that's where they want to start their investigation. And so Lane, who is the dude who found the camera, is like, well, I'll tell you, but I want us to go out with you guys because we want to look for it too. And they like go outside and they take like a vote, but really there's not a vote because they don't have, like, if they don't take them, then they can't find out where the camera was found, and then they're just out like instantly. They have no lead. So eventually they're like, all right, sure, yeah, come on, man, you can come with us. So Lane and his girlfriend also join the party. Um, they like pack up, they go, they park at the woods, they're walking into it. As they're walking, they mention like the whole story about the guy who supposedly killed the children and even make them look in the corner, and supposedly like the witch was telling him to do it and stuff. But they do add in a thing that I was like, well, that's gonna come back later. And I say that, but I mentioned I saw the movie earlier, but I didn't remember anything about it really. um, where they mentioned that they think he had like tunnels underground where he was moving people like in and out or whatever, kind of like a underground railroad system type of thing. Um, and so I made sure to jot that down because I was like, well, that'll come back later, and it does, but I wouldn't say it's important. Like nothing really groundbreaking or anything comes out of it. Um, I think that's another thing that I don't like about this movie is the first movie. There's so much that you don't see that you can make up so much to yourself. Like if you go and watch that old episode, we go through and we talk about all the theories people have about how maybe, um, like I think his name was Josh, and the other dude, they conspired to like kill Heather, and it was all set up. They talk about how maybe the dude who killed the children is still out here. Um, there's all these theories, but this movie, everything's so blatant about what's happening. There's nothing to make up for yourself. Like they kind of want you to think that not Peter, Lane and his girlfriend might be evil, I guess, but there's so much supernatural stuff going on that it's not them. Like there's just nothing. There's no theories I think you can make up for yourself in this movie because it's just so blatant in your face. This is what's happening. It's a witch lady. She's setting up all these spooky traps, and it's just very straightforward. There's nothing you can, and that's one of my favorite things is like the theories of Blair Witch. When we watch Lake Mungo, that was one of my favorite things was the theories about why the girl or how the daughter really died in that movie and stuff. And this movie just doesn't have that. It's just very by the numbers. This is what's happening. There's nothing else to it. Oh. So, yeah. So they're walking in the woods. They come across a lake. And literally like this is like they've been in the woods for like 5 minutes now, and they cross this lake, and Ashley like steps on a rock and like cuts the bottom of her foot, so instantly she's like limping as soon as they get here. um yeah, she's limping. They're trying to heal her foot, they're patching up her foot, and everyone's already mad at each other, and they just got here. Like Blair Witch, the first one, there was like a couple days, and then finally people started to snap on each other, and they started getting mad at Heather for filming and stuff. And in this one, literally, as they're like bandaging her foot, they get mad at the girl who's filming the documentary because she's sitting there filming and they want her to help fix up the foot. And then they get mad at Lane, who's filming on his own camera for his own channel, and they're like pushing his camera away. And just instantly everyone hates each other. Like, it was like, give it a couple days before everyone just starts turning on each other, you know? Eventually they patch her up and they're like, all right, we're good to go. Literally, like, the next 10 minutes is just them, like, messing with tents and trying to fix tents, and they're like cooking hot dogs and stuff. um and the redneck girl is like explaining to the group the story of the Blair Witch, and and everything, and just kind of setting up more. So it's stuff we've heard before. It's stuff we heard in the previous two movies if you watch them. um and so yeah, so the next 10 minutes is literally just all of that. And finally they go to sleep and you're like, all right, here we go, something's gonna happen, you know. But like I said, I'll probably play a clip here of it. It's just like branches snapping and then like a big loud boom or something, and it's very fake sounding, like it was all added in post. And I hated it because the other movie, it was so creepy, all the sounds they would hear outside, because they were really making them. It was like they would have speakers outside, or they would be stomping on the ground, you know. And this one, it was just so fake and soulless sounding. um Eventually, when like the super loud boom goes off, uh they're all checking on each other, and we find out that Lane is missing. He went to go like take a pee, but apparently he goes like far out to take a pee. um so no one wants to go with the redneck chick to go find her boyfriend, so eventually James, the Heather's brother, is like, well, I'll go with you. um so he goes walking with her, and after a couple minutes it does like a classic, like, Lane just jumps out of a bush, and there's just a cheap jump scare. This movie's littered with cheap jump scares. And he's like, did you guys hear those noises? I was going to try to find out what did that. And they were like, yeah, we heard it, come back to camp, you know. So they go back to camp, and that's the end of night one. And then when they wake up in the morning, there's a bunch of stick figures, like, hanging out of the trees and stuff, and it freaks them out. Ashley and Peter want to leave, and so James is like, all right, yeah, let's just get out of here, this is enough evidence that something's out here for the cops to reopen the case on my sister. Which I did like that they immediately are like, yeah, let's leave, because if you think back to the original Blair Witch, I think there was like a good couple days before they decide we're just gonna leave. When like the first night, there's enough sounds where you're like, maybe we should just get out of here, you know. So these people, I do like that they just decide to leave. As they're walking to go back to where the cars are, Ashley like takes a step and falls down, and her foot's hurting her. It only happens like once here, but eventually it starts happening more and more, where when she takes a step, you'll hear like this, like it sounds like it's like a bone breaking or snapping. And I was like, she has a cut on the bottom of her foot. That's not how this works, you know. But then later, spoiler, this is jumping ahead a little bit. I guess what that sound is they look at her foot at one point, and like something is like bulging out of her foot, like trying to break out. And then eventually, like, it spreads up her leg, and she pulls something out of her leg at one point in the movie that you can only see for like a second, and I had no idea what it was. And I read that people think maybe it was like a root. There's a lot of things involving roots of trees and all this stuff. So people think maybe it was a root growing in her leg. But anyway, it's very weird. All this is lead up to say that as they're helping her on the ground with her hurt foot, the lady who's filming the documentary is behind Lane, and she sees that in his backpack he has like spools of rope or whatever. And they're like, this rope is the rope from those stick figures. You made those. And they were like, yeah, we did. Like instantly. And their reason for it is because they just want someone to believe that something is happening out here. Because they're like, something is going on. We just needed other people to believe. So we thought maybe if we made these things, you would take it more seriously and stuff. Because as they were going to the campsite, Peter the whole time is just like laughing at them and basically making fun of everything they believe in and stuff. Kind of a real dick move by him. But yeah, so since they made the fake stick figures or whatever, and then it turns out like they're lost, they don't know which way they're going. So then Peter and James kick them out of the group. They're like, all right, you guys walk and you leave us alone. I don't want to see you again. Which I thought was weird because they're lost and they're the ones who've been there their whole life. They know the area. So even if they're lost, you would think they have a better chance of figuring out where they're going than these people who have never been here before, you know? But they kick them out. There's a great shot scene that I loved where Lane is like half in a bush, half out of the bush, like, guys, come on, man, can I can I come back? And Peter like takes off his backpack and like runs at him, and Lane like turns around. He's like, Jesus Christ, and he goes running off. I like that scene.
Guy, are you sure does this have to happen? We can talk about this. We can talk about it.
Lane, I swear to
Oh, God, no, but wait, hold on! Ah!
But anyway, yeah, so Lane and his girlfriend get kicked out. They go walking alone this time. They're trying to follow like the GPS. I guess they left something in the car, so they're trying to follow the GPS to the car. But they wind up back at the old campsite, so somehow they've been turned around and they don't know how it happened. They decide they're going to stay the night there, though, because Ashley needs to rest her foot because she can barely walk at this point. This is when it keeps doing, like, every step she takes, you hear, like, the crunching sound. So, they set up camp for that night. And Ashley's like, this is when they check her foot and see that thing I told you about bulging out of it. Ashley also is getting a fever. She's sick at this point too. Something is, infecting her. They try to fly this drone that they have up above to look to where the entrance is. But it ends up like losing signal and it crashes in the trees. So now they can't even use the drone they have, Eventually, Peter goes to get firewood. And when he's walking back with a bunch of sticks, his walkie-talkie starts going off, and it sounds like a demon like screaming. It's a creepy sound effect. And then he hears like, it sounds like multiple people. It's a bunch of women like around him, like cackling or screaming. Like it's just this weird sound. And then he hears like another one of them loud bangs. So he goes running. But eventually just a tree falls on him. Just someone chopped a tree and it, falls on him. And James at camp hears that and he goes looking for Peter. But before he can get there, we see Peter like dragged away. So now Peter is gone for the rest of the movie. Then the movie does literally back to back. The girl filmed the documentary is back at camp and she's looking at something and she turns around and Ashley is in her face and it does a jump scare and Ashley's like, where's Peter? I don't feel good, and the girl's like, oh, just go back to bed. So then when she puts her in the tent, she turns around and now James is in her face and scares her. And yeah, so it literally does back to back jump scares. After this is probably one of my favorite little bits of the movie where Lane and his girlfriend pop back up at the edge of the woods and they're like, when was the last time you guys saw us? And James is like, this afternoon when we kicked you guys out. And Lane and them are like, it's been like 5 days. Like, we haven't seen you guys in 5 days. Like, the sun won't come up. We don't know what's happening and stuff. And Talia, or whatever the girlfriend's name was, wants to stay with the group because she wants to be with people and she thinks they're better off than what they are. But Lane is like, no, I'm getting out of here. You can stay here if you want. So he leaves, and the redneck girlfriend is left with the rest of the group. The next morning, the alarm goes off at like 7 o'clock, but it's still pitch black outside. The sun hasn't come up like that guy mentioned. And when they go out of the tent, literally like the whole forest around them has been littered with like those stick figures. And like giant ones that are like the size of a person and stuff. Like, it was cool looking. Like, you literally couldn't see 10 feet in front of you because the forest was so dense with like all these stick figures that the witch or someone had made. And I couldn't help but like make myself laugh picturing like the Blair Witch during the night, like being real sneaky, making these stick figures and being like, when they wake up, this is gonna scare the shit out of them. Hope you guys are staying hydrated, by the way. You know, Thanksgiving and stuff, all your arteries are clogged, all that turkey. Drink some water, it'll help or something, I don't know. So the redneck chick is like freaking out looking at all this stuff. Ashley wakes up and finds out that Peter's gone, and she sees that the redneck chick is here, and she starts blaming her. She's like, this is all your fault, you guys did this. Meanwhile, the redneck chick finds a stick figure that has her hair on it, and she's like, how did they get this, you know? But as she's looking at it, Ashley walks up and she's like, this is your fault, you did this. And she takes the figure with her hair on it and breaks it in half. And the redneck girlfriend literally like, and just snaps in half. It was like a voodoo doll or something. And they're like, oh, you know, so they start freaking out. A tent like flies up in the air, so they all go running. And this is when like James and the girl filming the documentary are together. Ashley gets separated, and this is when she pulls the thing out of her leg. And then she before that, James like on the radio hears Peter, and they're like, he hears Peter and he thinks that maybe Peter's still alive, but then they hear like a scream happen, and so then it just keeps cutting between both of their faces as they're screaming and freaking out, and no one's moving, and it was just really bad. And then he like calms her down, but they have this weird romantic storyline going on too between James and the main girl. And so he's like calming her down and stuff, and I was like, eventually he calms and they keep walking, but I didn't like it. Ashley is walking, and eventually she finds the drone like up in a tree, and for some reason she's like, I gotta get that. So she starts to climb up the tree. Meanwhile, keep in mind, she can't use this drone. She doesn't have the tablet or anything to use it. So I don't know why she's going up here to get it. I assume maybe she thinks she can get back to the other two and they'll be able to use it. But either way, she climbs up this tree, and then like you see an arm come out and like push her down. And so she falls out of the tree, and then she's dragged away. And that's the end of Ashley. Eventually, James and the girl filming the documentary come across the house. It looks different than the last time we saw it. This is more like a cinder block looking house. And they hear a woman yelling, and James thinks that it's his sister Heather. So he's like, I gotta go in there. And Ashley's like, or not Ashley, the girl filming the documentary is like, you know that's not your sister. There's no way she could still be alive, you know, after all this time. But he's like, no, I gotta go in here. This is why I came here. So he goes in. As he goes in, I will say, there was an interesting thing where when they first came in the woods, they found this tree that was struck by lightning, and they like, and they look at the tree for a long time. As the girl is outside like moving around and filming, if you look, you can see the tree that was struck by lightning. So they're at literally the entrance, and it's completely different now. There's like a house there and stuff. So I did think that was interesting. But yeah, James goes into the house. He goes into a room. It's like the first room he goes in, and we see Peter facing the corner. And then like a door slams behind him. So when he looks to the door and then looks back, Peter's gone. He keeps seeing like glimpses of a lady going in and out of rooms. So he keeps following her, thinking that it's Heather. And eventually he gets locked in a room. And then there's like a weird... His flashlight's going out, and there's like a weird ghost that's coming at him. And I couldn't tell if that was supposed to be Heather or the witch or, who it was supposed to be. Outside, the girl eventually sees like the witch in the woods, like walking around. And so she goes in the house because she's like, I gotta get away from him. The witch in this movie, they try to say it's not the witch, but she literally, the woman playing her is credited as the Blair Witch like stunt double, is like this old naked lady with like these elongated limbs that are like stretched out. I thought maybe it was because when they were telling her backstory, Lane was saying how they tied her high up in a tree and then put attached like rocks and weights to her arms and legs. So I was like, oh, maybe it like stretched her out, But then I saw like the director, the guy who wrote it, says that that's supposed to be just like a victim of the Blair Witch, not the actual Blair Witch herself. But I don't think you can do that. I think that has to be the Blair Witch. So I'm still going to say it's the Blair Witch. So anyway, yeah, she goes running inside. Eventually she goes into the basement. That's the basement of the last movie. It's got like the block walls and stuff. If you remember the look of that basement, that's the basement, And finally she finds Lane down there, and Lane looks like he's been here for like a year now. He's just covered in dirt. His hair is wild. And he's talking crazy, and eventually he's like, you have to do whatever she tells you to do. And he smacks the girl over the head, and then he drags her down into a cellar underneath the house. And this ends up being where these tunnels are that they mentioned earlier. And so this is what I mean. Like, the girl goes crawling through the tunnel, and she gets stuck at one point, but then just does like some breathing and is able to get through. And so then when she gets to the end of it, it just like leads to like another bigger basement type room. And that's it. That's all the tunnels really come into play with. Lane is there waiting for her to get out. But she has like a pocket knife. So she like stabs him in the neck. And so Lane is dead now. This is when she goes running and she looks back and we see the Blair Witch like right behind her. And this is the beginning of the movie. Like what we're watching. Like you see the Heather's reflection in the mirror. She goes running into a room and locks it. James ends up being in here. He was hiding. And so they're hiding from the Blair Witch, but then through like the slats in the wall, this light comes shining. It looks like there's a UFO now, like outside. And then the Blair Witch eventually is gonna bust into the wall. Or into the room. So James is like, get in the corner because we can't look at her. Because if you look at her, that's when you die. So you have to face the corner. And so they're doing that and it's working. But then James starts to talk to his sister. And so then he turns around and he's taken. And so then the girl is like crying and she takes the camera and she's flips it so you see behind her, and she is looking, and you see like the Blair Witch behind her, and she's like, oh, which I kind of think is cheating. I think that should count as you looked at her. And then she starts to back up out of the room, But eventually she hears like Peter's voice, or not Peter, James's voice again. So she looks, but it was just a trap, and it was the Blair Witch. And so she gets dragged away. The camera falls down, and then it's just kind of filming the room for a little bit. And that's the end of the Blair Witch. This movie had a budget of $5 million. Made a box office of $45 million. So it definitely, made some money. Not a flop, Let's do best of, worst of. My best of for the movie is definitely the girl getting broken in half. It was cool. I really like that. Sort of came out of nowhere too. It was like, oh man, So that's my best of. Worst of is that scene where it just keeps cutting between like the screaming faces of everybody and stuff. I really didn't like it. So yeah, that's my worst of. But I think that's it. This is going to be the shortest episode we've had in a long time. Which, it's the day after Thanksgiving. I'm stuffed still. So we deserve a nice little short episode. I'm sure next week when we're watching the Foo Fighters, it'll be much longer. But yeah, I think that's about it for Blair Witch. Go check out the description. Gaming channel and stuff is down there. We have videos. We've been trying once a week, Saturdays at 8 a.m. in the morning, baby, to have a video, and we've been doing pretty good recently. And so we have like the next 7 weeks scheduled out or something. So things are pretty cool over there. Yeah, and then next week Studio 666, and then we'll be back to finish off Chucky. And after that, I don't know what we're gonna do. We got a bunch of just random movies that we got picked. So yeah, thanks for watching, listening to this very short Blair Witch episode that I just tried to get done while I'm stuffed with turkey. And there's like 9 hours before this is supposed to come out. And yeah, see you guys next week. Bye.